Thank you, Norman, and welcome to our webinar. This is going to be a great moment for us because it was a lot of work to get where we are today. Today we want to talk about our new circular profiles, and that's different because usually when Selux comes up with an innovation, it's more the product. But today we want to talk about light. And this is because we understood that doing artificial light in outer spaces has to be in harmony with nature for the future. And this little sentence has affected tremendously our way of thinking. In the last 10 years, we always used the word human-centric lighting. And that was focusing on our demands. But doing outdoor lighting means that this is maybe not the way we should do it. Because we have to understand that, as I said before, that in nature, where we do artificial lighting, this is also something we do which is affecting animals and plants. That's why we like the wording nature-centric lighting for us much more. And it came to the consequence that we have identified 3 core areas where we have to take care about: planetary resources, human needs, and ecological needs. Planetary resources, one of the core issues for all of us today. We all know that the activities of human beings on this planet have forced it into a very difficult situation. And we have a tremendous project in front of us. We want to be climate neutral within the next 12 years. And outdoor lighting has a strong impact here. We all heard and understand that up to 50% of the resources needed energy-wise in villages and small cities is coming up due to electrical lighting for outdoor lighting. So why not easily just put it off and don't use artificial light anymore? Well, we think that's a bad idea because we also have to see what progress humankind has achieved by using artificial light. It gives us security. It has a strong cultural aspect, and it's also something which is a strong demand for us, just to have this secure feeling and be able to read at nighttime and to travel safe home. However, what we said before, we also have ecological needs. And that means that what I said before is that everything we do as Selux in outer spaces is affecting all other species. That's where they live. That's where they try to find the partner for creating the next generation. And that's something we have to take into consideration. So these 3 areas force us to think in future about nature-centric lighting. But that's an easy word. But what does nature-centric lighting means? And what consequences does it have when we really develop products if we do not focus on human-centric lighting? Let us start by explaining a little bit the way of lighting works. Here you see a beautiful picture of a small city having horizontal and vertical light. The vertical light, which is shown there in the graph, is illuminating the facades, and vertical light is something human beings really desire. It gives us the chance to see other one's faces, and the 3-dimensional appearance of space gives us a good feeling for security. However, we also know that it has bad effects. So here in another example for clear, cut-off orientated dark sky illumination, where we only illuminate the horizontal part. That's where the norm is focusing on today. It's something which allows us to see, but it's not fulfilling all our desires. Another example is here shown with a typical bicycle path in a park. Human beings want to have norm-oriented lighting, and white, efficient light allows us to have a good color rendering and really see where we go. But we also know that this has a very negative effect on all other species. An alternative would be to illuminate this path with red light with about 630 to 640 nanometer. And this red light has a very, very positive effect on insects. And Dwayne Wagoner will explain you more about that in a minute. So here we show an example about horizontal illumination and the width of a lighting curve. This is a typical beautiful city where we see a wide road and a nice asymmetrical and symmetrical illumination of the area. An alternative would be to really make it more spot orientated. With this spot, we have less power consumption and we would achieve dark zones for owls and other animals and plants. But that has always pros and cons. So the question we were asking ourselves was, how can we meet all these needs? Understanding that these needs are different and someone is showing us how to do it, and that's the sun. The sun is never showing the same light. Sunlight is changing every day over the year and every hour over the day. Sometimes it's horizontal, sometimes it's direct, sometimes it's indirect, sometimes it's influenced by fog, sometimes it's influenced by clouds. So this natural rhythm is something which really supports life. And that was something we really looked at, and we got inspired to create something what we call today the circular profiles from Selux. But what does that mean? First, thinking about nature-centric lighting, it was necessary to understand what are the needs of nature. How did we achieve that? We worked a lot together with universities, with experts, lighting designers, experts for insects, experts for nature. And this is a very nice example where we really try to understand what effect on this test field artificial light has on the insect population. Then we got a better understanding, and out of that we got a clearer understanding that there are three core areas which are influencing artificial light. First, we can achieve, and we all know that, energy saving by working with the light intensity. Light color is very important. Light color affects our feelings, but also cold white colors are much more efficient than red colors. But it also has negative effects, as we learned. And then we can play with the light distribution. Vertical illumination, the width of a light curve, is something where needs of human beings, emotions, and energy efficiency really come together. And, which is something we also had to understand, is that light demand is unique for any place. So it's different using artificial lighting, doing it proper. If you want to illuminate a summer night in Oslo, a summer night in Munich, or a summer night in Lisbon. And even that is not enough. We understood that when you look at certain spaces, that there are different zones. This shown here on a typical city like Berlin. We have the core area, the culture area, where, like the Alexanderplatz, human beings are more in the front, and nature is not that dominant anymore. Then we have mixed areas, typical areas where we live, yards, our houses, and the walkway to our house, where we have more and more trees. And then we have the nature zone, parks, or when we have a bicycle path at nighttime, where humans should really take themselves back, and nature and the other species should have their focus. And last but not least, we had to understand, and we have to understand, that lighting depends on the time of the year and it depends on the time of the day. Human beings and animals act different on a cold January night than they do in a warm June night. So maybe this gives us some ideas how we could work with cold light, which is more efficient, or warm light, which helps insects to survive. Bringing that all together is today something which we all do by solving it with complex programming and configuration. If we want to do today a bicycle path and we want to do it in harmony with nature, someone has to bring a product which has 2 color temperatures, someone has to program his concept, you need complicated hardware and software, and then someone has to install the luminaires, and you need an after-sales service for that. That is complex and it's expensive and it's a high entrance barrier. So wouldn't it be great just to have a luminaire which understands what it has to do. You just put it somewhere, plug and play, and the luminaire individually understands where it is and what it has to do to bring energy efficiency, human needs, and nature needs together. How do we achieve that? With our new Selux circular core. That's a little intelligent unit within every luminaire. And this intelligent unit knows where it is by the GPS data, and it knows what time of the year it is and what time of the day it is. And that allows the luminaire to understand what it has to do if we tell her what it has to do. And how do we achieve that? We can use it in every luminaire in future. So you just pick out the luminaire, the Avanza or Etal, which has the core included, and then you pick the circular profile. And for the beginning, we start with 5 basic light profiles, which all have a certain focus on fulfilling certain requirements. And Dwayne Wegener will now explain you in detail what that means. So I'm really happy to hand over to Dwayne. And Dwayne, please let them understand what we want to achieve with the basic light profiles from Selux.
At the beginning, we would like to show you some profiles that are intended better for protecting animals and nature. Studies show a significant decline in various insect groups in recent decades. In German nature reserves, this decline was estimated at around 77% of biomass between 1986 and 2016, and as much as 82% during the peak flight season in midsummer. In the Netherlands, the decline was observed mainly in large butterflies, including moths, beetles, and caddisflies. In the UK, a decline in moths was documented between 1968 and 2017. The reasons are many. Above all, habitat loss and fragmentation, invasive agriculture, and climate change are being discussed as reasons. In recent years, it has also been recognized that artificial lighting also plays a role in insect mortality and that there is a correlation between the brightness of a region and the decline of various insect groups. Among other things, artificial light also disturbs insect flight and affects the natural rhythms and behaviors of insects. About half of insect species are nocturnal. Light interferes with their senses. Insects need the light of the moon and stars or even their reflection on water in order to orient themselves, track their prey, and escape their predators. Artificial lighting affects insects in a direct way through what is known as the vacuum cleaner effect. Insects are drawn from their natural habitat to the light source and partially perish. Furthermore, light affects their physiology, especially pheromone production and mating activity. Reduction of food intake and changes in growth, and reduces protective mechanisms against predators. The decline of insects not only has a direct impact on biodiversity. Apart from providing food for birds and other animals, insects have a great economic value simply through their pollination services. Without insects, plant diversity in meadows declines. Meadows become impoverished and less able to respond to changing environmental conditions. In turn, fewer animals find food and habitat in impoverished ecosystems. Species extinction is further accelerated. The loss of biodiversity is also threatening to humans and thus destroys our complex ecosystem as we know it. Recent scientific studies show that many insect species do not have red receptors for light in the long-wave red range. Insect groups have different receptors. Almost all species have UV receptors, and most species have a blue and/or a green receptor. Recent scientific studies show that many insect species do not have red receptors for light in the long wavelength red range. There is no evidence of reduced traffic safety from orange or red light, and it may even aid night vision for pedestrians and cyclists by maintaining dark adaptation. One effect of this evolutionary adaptation is that these insects are strongly affected by bright, very cold, artificial light sources at night. The cooler the light temperatures and the brighter the light source, the greater the disturbance to insects. Warm to red light sources can offer sufficient light for the human eye when insect populations are particularly vulnerable in the deep, dark night. On the other hand, cool light from predominantly short wave radiation is efficient and energy-saving and allows us to artificially extend the daylight period, especially in the winter. Insects are cold-blooded animals. If the outside temperature is low, their body temperature also drops and they cease their activity. As different as the insects are, so different are their tactics for hibernation. What's more, depending on the species, insects can survive the winter in different stages, as an egg, a larva, a pupa, or as an adult insect. To do this, many insects crawl underground, in piles of leaves, under tree bark, in masonry, barns, attics, etc., and lapse into a cold torpor, also called hibernation. Some butterflies are so-called migratory butterflies, which are attracted to warmer areas in winter. As soon as it gets warmer, the insects awaken again, and their activity increases. Some survive the cold season protected in an egg and hatch out as larvae in spring. Others survive winter as adult insects. But we do not see all insects on the first days of spring. This is because the awakening phase varies from species to species. Because especially in spring, warm days can be quickly followed by a frost phase. This could mean the end of many insects. For this reason, the awakening of wasps, for example, can take several weeks, during which peacock butterflies or bluewood bees are already active. This continues to increase towards summer, the most active time, which then decreases again cyclically with colder days in the autumn. I'm happy to present to you the first of our many profiles, Biological Red, Nature and Insect Protection for Particularly Vulnerable Places. 2700 Kelvin is more efficient than red spectrum lighting, but more critical to use in landscape and nature conservation areas with increased insect activity. In the winter months, the dark periods are much longer. For instance, in Berlin, on the winter solstice, the night hours are around 16 hours long compared to the summer months in Berlin on the 21st of June in the summer solstice, where the night hours are over 7 hours long. So in winter, much more efficient light is essential. The light profile, Biological Red, optimizes this on a scientific basis and dynamically adapts the light color to the natural rhythms of insects over a course of the year. The Biological Red light profile takes into account the activities of a cross-section of insects, and then adjusts the light color between the red spectrum and 2700 Kelvin in an insect-conscious manner depending on the activity in the relevant months. In the example shown here, no insects are active in the cold winter months, so the more efficient light color of 2700 Kelvin is used, and particularly gentle red is used in the insect-active months, such as summer. In zones where it is desired to work with white light at human times of human activity, it is also possible to change the light color with the span of the night. The luminaire turns on independently after sunset to 100% of the predefined light output with the light color 2700 Kelvin and changes to the red tone during the evening and dims down during the night. 1 hour after nautical twilight, it goes to 50% at 2700 Kelvin. 1 hour before sunrise during the morning rush hour, it goes back to 100% with its white light component. The luminaire switches on independently after sunset at 100% of the preset light output with a color temperature of 2700 Kelvin and switches to red during the evening and decreases during the night. 1 hour after dusk, it switches to 50% at 2700 Kelvin. 1 hour before sunrise, during the morning rush hour, it switches back to 100% white light at 2700 Kelvin. Initially, our Avanza, Ilu, Tal, and Saturn luminaires will be available with the Biological Red light profile. I'm happy to present to you our next lighting profile, Biological White, Nature and Insect Conservation in Urban Areas. Warm light, with 3000 Kelvin, is more efficient, around 9%, than 2200 Kelvin, but much more critical to use in times with increased insect activity. The light profile, Biological White, optimizes this on a scientific basis and dynamically adapts the light color to the natural rhythms of insects over the course of the year. The Biological White light profile takes into account the activities of a cross-section of insects, and then adjusts the light color between 2200 Kelvin and 3000 Kelvin in an insect-conscious manner depending on the activity in the relevant months. In the example shown here, no insects are active in the cold winter months, so the more efficient light color of 3000 Kelvin is used, and the gentler, warmer light color of 2200 Kelvin is used in the insect-active months. Here you can see biological white during the course of the day. The light intensity is dimmed down and up again overnight. This intelligence is also available as a dynamic intensity profile without a biological white function, but with a static light color. This applies from spring to autumn. The luminaire switches on independently to 100% of the predefined light output after sunset. The light intensity is then dimmed down to 50% of the light quantity in the mixed zone from 9 p.m. and in the colder zone at midnight. At 4 a.m. again, with the start of the first commuters, the luminaire switches back to 100% to ensure traffic safety. In winter, when the nights become longer, the artificial light phase is extended. At the beginning, our luminaires, Avanza, Ilu, Tal, and Saturn, will be available with the light profile biological white. How can we create atmosphere in places where people come together and at the same time preserve the natural rhythms of plants and animals? How can we act according to these needs and also be energy conscious? In the following slides, I would like to present two more lighting profiles for gentle and atmospheric lighting in outdoor spaces. We know that artificial light helps us to see at night. Light gives us security, guides our movements, focuses our attention, and invites us to pause and reflect. With good lighting, we create beauty, emotions, atmosphere, and quality of life to create special moments. Especially where urban life takes place during the night, atmosphere, well-being, and safety are important aspects of lighting. The feeling of space, which can be created by horizontal but also vertical light, is of particular importance. In such spaces, the lighting should not only be a horizontal two-dimensional surface, but should also extend to the three-dimensional space via the illumination of vertical surfaces. Vertical illumination of pedestrians, cyclists, facades, and street elements ensures better recognition and provides us a sense of space. This creates atmosphere and well-being in addition to safety, so that a strolling and lingering quality is maintained. But vertical light is also responsible for stray light. And as we know, a dark night sky with twinkling stars is much more than just the perfect background to design urban spaces with light. A dark sky is important for biodiversity and natural rhythms, and thus the well-being of people, animals, and plants. I'd like to present the next profile, dynamic ambience, three-dimensional atmosphere and dark sky in urban spaces. It is the vertical light component that brings dimensionality to urban spaces, enabling well-being through a sense of space and heightened perception while enhancing the architecture. Purely horizontal light is more energy efficient and protects environments from stray light, enabling dark sky cities and quiet zones for nocturnal animals such as owls and bats. This is because the dynamic ambience profile intelligently balances these horizontal and vertical light components, orienting itself to the course of the sun throughout the year. The luminaire independently switches on the horizontal and vertical light distribution after sunset and slowly dims it down during the evening. Later in the evening, it switches off the vertical light component completely. Shortly before sunrise, during rush hour, it ramps up both light components again before switching off at daybreak. In winter, dynamic ambience simulates the blue hour in the high-traffic evening hours by illuminating facades, which we know from the residual light component in long summer sunsets. In summer, however, thanks to the long residual light of the sun, lower illuminance levels are sufficient to achieve the same effect. Accordingly, the ambience component acts differently depending on the season. For instance, in the late evening hours, the profile switches off the vertical light component and focuses on a dark sky compliant application, saving energy and reducing stray light, providing shelter for nocturnal animals. The following applies to the culture zone, After sunset, the luminaire independently switches the horizontal and vertical light distribution to 100% of the predefined light output and then slowly dims down both light distributions during the evening. Later in the evening, it switches off the vertical light component completely and focuses on a dark sky compliant application, thus saving 50% of energy and creating shelter for nocturnal animals. Approximately 2 hours before sunrise, during the morning rush hour, it returns to 100% horizontal and 90% vertical light components, supporting humans with artificial light before switching off at daybreak. On very short summer nights, when the sun sets very late, the ambience component is less used. At the beginning, our luminaires Lenova, as well as TreeTech luminaires, for example Era, Saturn, and LIF, will be available with the light profile Dynamic Ambience. I'm happy to present to you one of our last profiles, Dynamic Path: Atmosphere, Dark Sky, and Efficiency in Urban Space. Lighting in urban spaces enables safety. In addition to light color and light quantity, light distribution is essential for spatial awareness and orientation. Light distributions are planned for a specific purpose in each case, be it the size of a square or the width of a street. These have been traditionally static implementations. The dynamic path light profile controls horizontal light distributions based on time and usage frequency. The lighting effect can be designed differently during opening hours in winter, for example. This allows us to create different spatial experiences without much effort. Dynamic path intelligently balances wide and narrow light distributions on the horizontal surface. The higher uniformity of the wide light distribution ensures safety during the high traffic evening hours. During late night hours, the light distribution and light intensity are reduced, creating a calm cityscape with high visual comfort. At the same time, the narrow light distribution protects the night sky from stray light. By reducing the amount of light in half, 50%, energy is saved and light emissions are significantly reduced. The luminaire switches on independently to 100% of the predefined light output after sunset and dims both light distributions and light intensity during the late evening and night. In summer, thanks to the longer sunsets, lower illuminance levels of the wide distribution light component are sufficient to achieve the same effect. Accordingly, the wide distribution component acts differently depending on the season. For instance, at 4 a.m., both light components are increased again and switched off completely at sunrise. In summer, when the days are longer and nights shorter, the artificial light phase is shortened. Initially, the dynamic path light profile will be available with our ELU and TAL.
Thank you, Dwayne. So let me summarize what we just learned. Selux starts the journey with its circular profiles with 5 profiles. 3 of them are more focusing on the aspect of bringing the needs of human beings in harmony with the needs of plants and animals. The second ones are the ones like dynamic ambience or dynamic path, are more focusing on individual adaptations of the light curve to fulfill the requirement for beauty and safety of human beings, but also dark sky regulations and energy savings. So how does that work now? How do I pick my individual circular profiles? What is the path to an intelligent luminaire with an individual light profile? It's very, very easy. What we do in future is you just pick one of your 5 preferred selected base profiles, like for example dynamic red. Then you give us the information, where do I need the luminaire? So you inform us about the geographical position. That can be the road or GPS data. As we said before, we also understand that we recommend you to pick between different specific spaces: nature, mix, or the cultural area. This is so attractive because what you can do is you pick one luminaire which fits to all requirements, like for here example, the Saturn. And then you can have one luminaire, but you individualize the demand by using the different light profiles. In the middle, in the cultural area, just white, but in the nature areas, even the really focusing tool for insect protection, more reddish, but intelligent. Then by doing that, you just have to make a quick decision. Do I have a central override switch or not? This is important because if you have a central override switch, we hand that over to the centralized override switch, or if not, the luminaire understands where it is, understands when the sun goes up and down, and adapts its illumination to the normal rhythm of the sunlight. Then you just complete the order. And now comes the magic. You receive the luminaire with the profile, you install it, and the luminaire immediately understands what it has to do and fulfills its function. Here is a nice example about what you just picked. We decided to have biological white. We explain horizontally what the light intensity is doing. We explain you the challenge and a short description of each individual profile which you just picked for your individual product and for project. These are the circular profiles of Selux, a new way of thinking light in outer spaces. So our intelligent, science-based profiles create a really new simplicity. We allow now every mayor in every small village to have a very intelligent, smart solution for the future. However, if you are a lighting designer and you want to have a really complex, customized solution, this is also something we can easily fulfill now, because you just tell us your individual concept, we put it on the software, and you don't have to have complex installations for fulfilling your requirements. And that's what we call light in the rhythm of nature, and we thank you very much.